Tonight, we're in the historic town of Hamilton in Lanarkshire, the scene next week of a big by-election. The SNP want to hold this area, but Labour won here at last year's general election, and Reform are facing their biggest test in Scotland so far. A lot is riding on this result, so tonight we're joined by senior figures from some of the parties and by local voters who've come here this evening looking for answers to their questions. Welcome to Debate Night. Debate Night is the show where the people get to ask the big questions, answering them on our panel this evening. Kate Forbes is Scotland's Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for the Economy. She's also the MSP for Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch. From the Scottish Conservatives, Craig Hoy is an MSP for the South of Scotland, a former chairman of the party. He's now their spokesperson for finance and local government. Jackie Baillie is Deputy Leader of Scottish Labour. Jackie's also the MSP for Dumbarton and the party spokesperson for health and social care. Lorna Slater is the Scottish Greens co-leader. She's an MSP for Lothian and was a minister in Humza Yousaf's government until the Butte House Agreement collapsed. From Reform UK, Thomas Kerr is the party's councillor in Glasgow Shettleston after defecting from the Scottish Conservatives at the start of this year. And finally, the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, Alex Cole-Hamilton. Alex is MSP for Edinburgh Western and he's party spokesperson for health. Please welcome them all to Debate Night. And welcome to our studio audience here in Hamilton. It's great to be with you, our first time here on this auspicious occasion, and you can join in the discussion from home, wherever you happen to be in Scotland. BBC DN is the hashtag you need if you're on social media, and our podcast of this show will be available for you to download straight after the broadcast. So let's get started. Our first question of the night comes from Stuart Gunn. Stuart, good evening.
Why should we vote for any parties when the SNP have failed for 18 years, the Tories have messed up and lost to the Labour, who are already failing due to the national insurance rises, etc.?
Stuart, thank you very much indeed. We have three of the parties that have been running the country for the last few years with us here tonight. Kate Forbes, how much responsibility, how much blame do you take for this?
Well, in this election next week, it's ultimately about a local champion. It's about a local representative. Christina McKelvey served you as your local MSP for years, since 2011, and in that time she demonstrated what it meant to be a local representative who could deliver. On your behalf, she piloted energy schemes, she ensured that there was a master plan for Hamilton town centre, and that's what's at stake next week. A local representative that will put your interests first and deliver for you.
But you're going to be judged on your track record over the last 20-odd years running Scotland, Kate,
and
aren't you? Is that why this is going wrong for you?
And our track record will be that even when we don't get things right, you can count on us to always stand up for Scotland, to always stand up for local communities. And next week, it will be about who will make their voice heard. There's a lot of rhetoric at the moment, but you've got to cut through the rhetoric and look at the reality of what it means to represent a local area. And Councillor Katie Loudon, who's the SNP's candidate, will do exactly that. She's been a councillor for a number of years, and she will deliver for you.
That's not the question. The question is about your track record, what you've done so far. Is that why you're struggling? Is that why this is a three-horse race at the moment here?
In terms of our track record, I made the point already that we will always stand up for Scotland. We will deliver locally. We'll accept where there are challenges and where we need to identify solutions, but we won't shy away from those challenges, and we'll ensure that there is planning for the NHS to ensure that we cut waiting times, that we reduce delayed discharge, and that we deliver for local people. That includes local investment. It includes local investment in roads, in infrastructure and facilities. And so there's no shortage of challenges right now. We know that. But what you can get from the SNP is a party and a local candidate that will always put your interests first.
Stuart seems to be scunnered with all political parties at the moment. Jackie Baillie, you've been running Westminster for the last year. What would you say to him?
Well, the Labour Party has been in government at Westminster for 10 months. The SNP have been in charge of a whole host of services that have devolved to Scotland for 18 years. Now, you're not standing up for Scotland if you're 1 in 6 people on a waiting list, looking for diagnosis or treatment from the NHS.
Well, come on to some of these things, but what about your own track record over the last 10 months?
Well, let me say, you're not standing up for Scotland if you're then having educational attainment still not progressing. You're not standing up for Scotland if you've got 10,000 children in temporary accommodation because we're in a housing emergency. You know, they've had 18 years to get this right. If they had a good idea, we would have seen it by now. I don't think you're going to see it. I didn't interrupt you. Please don't interrupt me. And let me say, you know, Kate is right about a local champion. The only local person amongst the three parties you talked about is, in fact, Davy Russell. He was born here, he's lived here his whole life, he volunteers in Sense Scotland for...
Jackie, that wasn't Stuart's question. Stuart's question was about track record in the last year. Was axing the winter fuel allowance standing up for Scotland?
Let me tell you, standing up for this constituency is voting for the £8 million that's being devoted to Hamilton Town Centre. Katie Loudon didn't do that. She didn't vote for the £12 million that's going into roads to fix potholes. She's not standing up for this area. She doesn't live in this area. Davy Russell does.
OK, let me hear from the audience. They are the voters here. Man with the glasses on the aisle. Yes, on you go.
Just to say that to keep the context going in terms of the bigger picture, 51% of Scotland's GDP goes into the public sector. My wife and I run a small social care company. South Lanarkshire Council, for the recent national insurance increase, 60% of the council's increase is paid for by the Scottish Government. We get absolutely nothing. I'm really worried about the direction of travel. I see Labour and SNP in the mix there. I think the public sector is too bloated in Scotland. I think unless we have businesses that are willing to pay taxes and support the economy, we are in real trouble.
Stuart, who asked the question, said he's fed up with politics and the way it's being run. Is that how you feel?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there are pieces of good in all of them. So, you know, we're not here to knock everybody necessarily, but I think that, unfortunately, the reality of life in Scotland at the moment is that we feel like we're moving in the wrong direction, and it's hard to know who's going to fix it. OK, I'll let you come back in, Jackie. I want more hands up in the audience. There's plenty at the moment. Man in the middle there. Yes, on you go.
How can we trust Labour when you get into Westminster, you get in with lies? You promised the pensioners you'd look after the pensioners and everything else, and the first thing you did was took the pensioners' winter payment away. Now you are hitting the single parents and stuff like that. I get the budget. You've got to watch the budget, but pensioners, okay, these are the ones that trusted you.
Jackie Baillie.
So let me say to you, first of all, that the winter fuel allowance is now devolved. It's a responsibility of the Scottish Government. What they did was they decided not to pay it out. They were given the money to do so, and then to halve it. Now, what's going on, and I welcome this, is that Scottish Labour have said very clearly and unequivocally that we will reinstate the winter fuel allowance in full for every pensioner in Scotland. And indeed, Keir Starmer is now saying that he will look again at that position, will reverse that position, and ensure that people in Scotland, particularly pensioners, get the winter fuel allowance.
Under Labour, 36,000 pensioners in South Lanarkshire lost their winter fuel payments. Do you know who has restored a winter fuel payment? Is the SNP.
No,
so if you want specifics about how we deliver locally and for South Lanarkshire and this constituency, it's the SNP. We've decided to stop the two-child cap, which is penalising parents and penalising third and fourth kids. We've done that. Labour haven't. And do you know the other thing is that Jackie Baillie didn't even vote for those elements. She did not vote to restore a winter fuel payment. So if you want to know what the SNP will do for you, we'll always stand up for you and we will unpick the worst harms of Labour or the Conservatives.
Craig Hoy, you don't get out of this because the Conservatives in power for 14 years at Westminster. How much blame do you accept for the way that Stuart feels here?
Well, look, I'm going to address the point. I'm going to do something that neither Kate Forbes or Jackie Baillie are prepared to do, which is admit we got things wrong. And it's interesting to watch two failing governments here squabbling tonight about how much they're both respectively failing Scotland. Now, the interesting thing is we got things wrong and we paid a price for it. And that's why under our new leader, Russell Findlay, and with our local candidate here, Ricky Nelson, we are determined to come up with common sense policies that tackle the real issues here.
Do you think you'll lose your deposit here, Craig?
We are fighting hard. I've been out on the doorsteps with Ricky Nelson. People know who he is. They know he's a local champion. They know that he advocated to make sure that we got the Larkhall Leisure Centre. He was telling me today that he meets the local police once or twice a month, and they're telling him that they need more powers to tackle antisocial behaviour in the communities here. He's advocating for more investment in Hamilton Town Centre. He is a local champion, and actually being out the doorsteps with him at the weekend was a real joy, because people were talking about what he's done in the heart of these communities, and he is committed to these communities. And I would recommend voting for Ricky Nelson, because at the end of the day, we can see here already the SNP have let down Scotland as the Scottish Government, and how Labour have let down Scotland since they came into office.
Well, we actually have 4 parties here that have been in government, because the Greens, until that messily collapsed, were part of it as well, until the Butte House Agreement collapsed. How much responsibility do you accept through things like gender recognition, the disastrous bottle deposit return scheme, for the way that Stuart feels?
Well, I recognise how Stuart feels, and I want to set out that there is an alternative with the Scottish Greens. With things like free bus travel for under 22s. Anyone get that bus pass? Anyone's kids get that bus pass? Abolishing of peak rail fares, that's the Scottish Green policy. SNP took it away, but then they had to bring it back because so many people are using it. That peak rail fare being abolished gets you into and out of
What about the deposit return scheme? Scottish Government being sued over that.
So, yeah, we were weeks away from launching that scheme when the UK government used the Internal Market Act to shut it down. And it did indeed make businesses suffer. We were weeks away from launching a successful scheme when the Scottish government, when the UK government shut that down. And that is really, really disappointing. They never provided any evidence for why they did that, and it meant that businesses in Scotland were out of pocket, and we all have to put up with plastic bottles. And I wanted the scheme to go forward. It was the UK government that stopped it. So really,
this is
not
accurate.
It's actually factually incorrect, and this is something where we all want to see bottle recycling. This was a failure of both governments to talk to each other at the time. That has now changed, thankfully.
That's not true, Jackie. I talk to the governments monthly, but Conservative ministers would not come to those.
Do you know what? I am looking at Stuart's face at the back here, and I suspect what is going on here is exactly why he asked the question here this evening. Alex Cole-Hamilton, the thing is at the moment, if people are scunnered with traditional politics, they could have gone to you, they could have gone to the Liberal Democrats, but they're not. They're going to Reform.
But
Why is that?
They did come to us, Stephen. In the last general election, Liberals had the best result in over 100 years.
And since then, Reform have grown here in Scotland.
In council by-elections across Scotland, we're winning again. We're making surprise gains. We overtook the Scottish Conservatives at the general election, trebled our seats, came within touching distance of the SNP. But my goodness, aren't you sick of this? Aren't you sick of the knockabout, of the blame game, of people not putting their hands up and properly admitting that they got things wrong and how they're going to fix things, and actually working together for a difference? You deserve better. You deserve to know that if you're ringing your GP in the morning at 8:30, that you're not 200th in line and you'll get an appointment at the first time of asking. You deserve to know that your local dentist will continue to offer NHS care. You deserve to know that your child's going to school in a classroom that is well staffed, that is small in terms of class sizes, and is not subjected to violence and antisocial behaviour. You deserve to know that at the end of the month, you'll be able to make ends meet. All of these parties have failed you. It's time for something different. With Aisha Mir and the Lib Dems, you can get that. You don't have to settle for Farage. Another way is possible. You do deserve better.
Thomas Kerr from Reform UK. What's going on with Reform at the moment? Yesterday, we heard some policies from your leader, Nigel Farage, which almost sounded socialist in terms of what he was offering. But he's at the other end of the spectrum in terms of immigration. So a £50 billion giveaway for the country, an end to the 2-child cap, the restoration of the winter fuel allowance, but then hard policies on immigration. What are you as a party?
Well, look, I think there's two elements. Firstly, to what Stuart said, I feel being scunnered because I share it. You've just seen why people are so fed up and angry with the political establishment that are there. And the scunneredness factor that I felt was the factor as to why I'm in the political party I'm in the now.
So what are you going to do differently? How are you going to change things for him?
I think the other thing I want to say is that Kate was right. The SNP may say they stand up for Scotland, they don't. When you look at the record of the SNP, they haven't. Jackie might say the Labour stood up for Scotland, but Labour MPs, the first decision they done was take away pensioners' winter fuel allowance. They didn't stand up for Scotland. No wonder people are so sick, fed up. Now, you asked why it is that Nigel is saying that the policies that he's saying. I think it's because the traditional left versus right in politics is gone. I think it's now people are so desperate, the cost of living crisis is biting, people are sick, fed up, that they're looking not between left and right, not between socialism and capitalism, not the ideologies that these guys sit in Holyrood and talk about. It's whether together you can do what's right and what's wrong, and I think that's what Nigel is looking at.
Or you're promising everything knowing you can't deliver it.
Well, the policies that have been outlined are policies that we have absolutely costed. Nigel laid out yesterday. I mean, Craig, don't speak to me about financial issues. I had to try and defend the Tory party after the disaster that was Liz Truss's budget because of people like you. So do not talk to me about finance.
I almost forgot you two about history, haven't you?
But look, I think I get why these guys are all terrified. I absolutely get it. They're petrified because Reform UK is
terrified.
Well, you should be.
Can I just make the observation?
Reform UK is on the rise because people are so scunnered and fed up.
The policies have been for a long time.
Hang on a second, hang on a second, Thomas. I'll come back to you. Jackie, on you go.
I mean, Thomas, I've known you for a long time, for 10 years. You know, you've always wanted to be a politician. You've always wanted to be a Tory politician. And in fact, you know, the candidate here for Reform in Hamilton just a few months ago was a Tory councillor. So you are the Tories in disguise. Everybody sees that.
Quite clearly.
But can I also say to you, Nigel Farage is the most poisonous, divisive person in politics. He doesn't care about Scotland. He doesn't care about Scotland.
He's racist. He's coming after your abortion rights.
He would really find it difficult to find Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse on a map. You know, he's never been here.
Well, we're told he'll be here before polling day, so let's find out. Thomas Kerr. OK, Jackie.
Will he debate
you made your
or will
point.
he run away?
OK, Thomas Kerr.
He'll find Hamilton on the map when he's here in a couple of days. Look, what Jackie said is right. I have always wanted to go into politics, and I'll tell you why. It's because I'm a working-class guy who grew up in the East End of Glasgow. Because both my parents were drug addicts, and I've seen social injustice, and I've seen it under SNP and Labour politicians. So Jackie's absolutely right. That is why I went into politics. That's why I fought the way that I did. And she's right. I was a Conservative councillor for 8 years. I don't make an apology for that, because these two had let down my community, and I thought that there may have been a bit of hope for the Conservative Party. It took me 14 years to realise, actually, I'm barking up the wrong tree. So I'm looking for something that's different. I have been on a journey the same way that the vast majority of the people of Scotland are. That's why Reform's doing so well. It's why, Jackie, we bet you in Clydebank. No, it's not opportunistic. Jackie, as I said,
and the Tories wouldn't put you there. This is about your political
OK, hang on a second. I want to hear from the audience, because they're the ones that will decide all this. Thomas, no, I'll come back to you. I will come back to you. Man in the tracksuit down at the front. Yes.
I find it comical how the SNP are saying they fight for everyone in Scotland when all they've done for the last 10 years is cause division with this stupid vote for independence, when after being told it was once in a generation, and they're still fighting for that as well.
Thank you. Man in the zip top in the middle. Yes, on you go. Yeah.
How are we doing? Just to come back to Stuart's point, Stuart's talking about how the parties in front of us here can stand up for Scotland. We need to get into the adult politic world of standing up for Scotland. And I'm seeing Jackie Baillie having a wee nod, but listen, we've got the Tories that Scotland didn't trust. We've got Labour who came in a ticket to power on the back of change, and all they've done, waspy women badly let down, closing the only oil refinery in Scotland, even though we supply 92% of the oil, leaving 5 refineries down south. Rebranding our energy as GB Energy. What is that to do, Jackie? That is ultimately to pay dividend payments to private investors down south and to fund the focus on nuclear power down south. That's what that's about. And why do we have a dividend payment to the people of Scotland of the highest energy standing charges in these isles?
Okay.
The reality is to come back to Stuart's question, we need the powers to join the dots of every aspect of every person that lives in this room right now, our families, our friends, our neighbours.
Okay.
Right? We need the powers to be able to, together, to move forward and actually take control of it.
We hear you. And lady down in the second row here. Yeah.
Aghast actually to hear about this master plan for Hamilton. I don't know how any of you's got here in time this evening. I know you had some trouble, Alec, but I don't know how any of you got here in time with the roads in Hamilton, which, like most towns round about this area, are in complete gridlock. Every 6 weeks, every 4 weeks, they get dug up again. There's no coordination. None of the services work with each other. You turn around, there's another one up, another one down. Where is all this money coming from? You must have driven past the town centre, which is a ghost town. What's that been doing for 19 years under SNP?
OK, all right, OK. These are big issues. For you all, I know, next week at the vote, over the last few days, there's been a huge controversy here because of a social media advert which has been running, which accuses Scotland's Labour leader, Anas Sarwar, of prioritising the Pakistani community. This is the first time we've all been in the same room on this. Jackie Baillie, what would you like to say to Reform UK and Thomas Kerr about that?
Frankly, I'm appalled. This is the kind of gutter politics that isn't about who we are as Scots. And I just find it really difficult to look at the racism, the stereotyping that's there. And Anas Sarwar was born in Glasgow. He was a dentist for the NHS. At the same time that he was working for the NHS in Scotland, Nigel Farage was on the gravy train in Brussels.
Is it a racist advert?
It is completely racist.
Thomas Kerr.
It's completely sectarian. This is not what Scotland is about.
Why did you choose to go down this route with this advert, Thomas Kerr?
We just heard Jackie say about gutter politics after she tried a personal assassination on me personally. That's gutter politics. Look, no, what Reform UK is... No, you didn't. No, you didn't, Jackie. You didn't tell the truth. You didn't tell the truth, which is not unusual for a Labour politician, I might add.
Oh.
But look, what this advert showed was a speech that Anas Sarwar himself gave, OK? Now, I get why the other parties don't like it, but Anas Sarwar is hoping to be First Minister for all of Scotland. He should be held accountable for what he said in the past.
What was wrong with his speech?
But there's plenty that's wrong with his speech. I think
there should be more people from Southeast Asia standing in Scotland, because we have people from Scotland from all over the world.
The difference
We're
between...
proud of our multicultural...
Lorna, the difference between me and you on this is I absolutely agree with that. But I think that people should get there on merit because they work hard. I don't care about someone's background, sex, sexuality, whatever it is, as long as someone gets there on their own merit.
But
I
Thomas,
think
he did not say in the advert that he would prioritise the Pakistani community.
No,
those were your words and not his words.
But the advert shows...
Do you accept they were not his words?
Look, the advert shows what I've said. The advert shows what Anas Sarwar himself said. If he is hoping to be First Minister, can I finish my point?
The Reform candidate here was on radio yesterday saying that those were not Anas Sarwar's words. They were words imported by Reform. And the point here is you've heard the rhetoric. You've got to cut through the rhetoric to understand the reality. It was racist, but there's something else that's troubling. It was dishonest. So if you want to restore trust in politics, you need honesty. If you want to ensure that we move forward together and cut any division that you're talking about, it has to be based on honesty and trust. And the reason why people feel let down is because they were promised change last year by Labour. It wasn't delivered. And you've got another party now coming in saying we're different. We're the anti-establishment party. And the first thing they've done is broken trust.
OK, Jackie Baillie has invited you to apologise, Thomas Kerr. Do you want to do that here tonight? Apologise for that.
I will not apologise for showing Anas Sarwar's own words. Anas Sarwar...
But they were not his own words, that's the point.
The speech that Anas Sarwar gave, it is very clear. I would encourage anybody to go and watch the speech themselves rather than the spin that we're hearing. Look, this is all a deflection tactic. You are hearing why this is a deflection tactic from a Labour candidate who's had a car crash for by.
All right, well, here's Craig Hoy, not Jackie Baillie. Craig Hoy, what do you want to say about this?
I think this is straight out of the Farage playbook. I'm not going to pass comment on what was said, because actually, if I do that, we're playing into Nigel Farage's hands here. Because what he did, and what you probably did, Thomas, you put that out there knowing it would create a political row and draw attention to your politics. But actually, if you want to quote somebody back at somebody, let's quote Thomas Kerr back at Thomas Kerr, because this is what you said during the run-up to the general election. A quote from Thomas Kerr, the same Thomas Kerr. So, Reform currently has candidates who are anti-monarchy, pro-independence and apologists for Vladimir Putin. Be careful what you vote for, Scotland. That's what Thomas Kerr said only a matter of a year ago. So be careful what you vote for, Scotland, because if you support reform, then I suspect you're probably going to get John Swinney, because that's all that's going to happen, is Reform are going to split the vote and allow the SNP to get re-elected.
Thomas Kerr, you've obviously changed parties since then, but what would you say to that?
These comments came up the last time I was on Debate Night, because Craig refused to use, but I tried to use the personal attacks. Look, I am happy to stand by what I had said last year, because at that point I did think that Reform has professionalised a massive amount of way. That's why the Tories are irrelevant in this by-election. Nobody's even talking about them.
Where are they getting money from?
Can I finish what I'm saying, please, because everybody wants wants to jump in, and I don't blame them. As I said, these guys are petrified.
We're not petrified.
They are absolutely petrified. Reform UK is on the rise. It's why we went from a by-election where Labour was the favourites to win to now, apparently, to John Swinney, it's a free horse race.
All right, OK,
the
Alex, I'll
reality
come
is
to you in a
these guys
second, but I
are
want to get
terrified
the
of
man with the
Reform
hat
UK.
who's nodding at me there. Yes, there you go.
So talking about medical personnel, dentists, doctors, and in the light of anti-immigration campaigns all over the country, how do you all want to address the shortage of medical personnel? That's one. Two is universities in Scotland are cutting full-time jobs. The UK is known as the second best after the US in terms of educational facilities and infrastructure. So, what would you do differently to reverse the trend?
OK, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Well, a friend there just articulated brilliantly why immigration is great and we need more of it. And actually, Scotland relies on people, skilled individuals coming in to do the jobs that we need them to do in our health service. All this stuff about the Reform advert, I am disgusted. I'm disgusted by this racist advert. I'm disgusted by the fact the very next day, Nigel Farage doubled down on it and played it again at a news conference. And I'm disgusted that we're burning time in this discussion talking about Nigel Farage, which he loves, when we should be talking about the Hamilton Master Plan, or the fact that your mum can't get a hip operation,
do you know
or
what?
that your brother's got long
That's
COVID.
what we're going to do now. That's what we're going to do now. The hashtag is BBCDN on social media for everything that you hear. Here's a full list of all the candidates standing in this by-election, and there'll be a special programme on BBC One Scotland at 11:40 next Thursday with Martin Geisler, a results programme. Let's go to our second question of the night, which comes from Susan Young. Susan, good evening.
Hi. Knife crime is on the increase, especially with the younger generation. How does the panel think we can stop this?
Thank you. New figures showing a sharp rise in knife crime in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Knife crime deaths, 3 of them in the course of the past 12 months here in Scotland. What do we do about this? Alex Cole-Hamilton, you used to work with young people. What's going on and what do we need to do about it?
I was a youth worker for 19 years and I worked with a lot of very disengaged, hard-to-reach young people in Scotland's inner cities. Kids aren't born bad, and there is a lot of pressure around them. There's a long shadow of lockdown, the fact that they spent some of the key years of their formative existence in their bedrooms under state sanction. And yet, year on year, we've seen a £20 million erosion in youth work spending under the SNP government. The fact that detached and sessional youth work is no longer a career of choice. People aren't volunteering for it. So young people are looking for direction. They're looking for support. And we don't do that by castigating them and trying to suggest they're all villains, because let's remember the vast majority of young people are far more likely to be victims of antisocial behaviour than perpetrators of it. I think we need to reset the narrative. I think, of course, if the police want more powers, they will come to the Parliament and tell us that they need that. But the Tories will tell you they want more stop and search. Well, the police have the power right now, if they suspect and have probable cause to think that somebody is carrying a knife, to address that and to say
900 knives found in Scotland last year through stop and search.
So that policy is working. The police have that power already. I think we're looking at this through the wrong lens. We need to look at this in co-production with our kids, our young people, to say that they aren't lost. We can help them. They just need our support. They need our investment. They need people, adults who are not parents or teachers, to provide a positive adult role model, and my goodness, they're our future. They deserve our support.
Susan, you asked the question. Have you got a young person in the family that you're worried about?
My son is in his 20s, mid-20s, but every time he went out, especially to Glasgow, I would wait up until he was back home because I was terrified that something would happen to him. It is quite worrying for anyone with children.
Lorna Slater.
Yeah, that does sound terrifying for parents of young men who are going out and feeling that. Scotland used to be an expert in reduction of knife crime, and that's because Scotland treated it as a social issue rather than a criminal one. And that approach clearly was working for many years. Now, it's gone backwards, and we need to understand why that has, because our approach was so successful that we were exporting it. experts in London wanted to know what we had done to reduce knife crime in Glasgow. So we need to look at that funding. We need to look at community spaces. Part of living under the Tories for 14 years is a gutting of our community spaces. You talked about Hamilton Sound Centre. Is there anything there where young people, or indeed anyone, can get together, meet, build those bonds, and have that sense of community, of belonging, and of having opportunities in a future? They haven't been. All that's been gutted. We need to rethink what our town centres are for and put back not just that funding for youth, but for everybody to rebuild those communities and sense of place.
If it is down to funding, Kate Forbes, you've just announced a 3% cut in the funding for Scotland's National Violence Reduction Unit. Why?
Well, we haven't announced that. We know that through the Violence Reduction Unit, that was how we pioneered, essentially, in Scotland, a means of substantially reducing knife crime. And as Lorna just said, it was a model that was then exported to other countries because of the approach that we took. And that approach, so every death or every injury from knife crime is one death or one injury too many. And the message to our young people is do not carry a knife. You may think it keeps you safer, but in an instant, that can turn into a horrendous situation. And that's what we have seen. There are two approaches to take. One is around education and prevention, and the second is through consequences, through our justice system and through our education system. In terms of the education, prevention is always going to be the most powerful route. Educating our young people when they are at the youngest of ages, age 11, age 10, about the consequences of carrying a knife. And then...
How do you do that?
It's what's taking place right now in our schools.
Because the Scotsman has reported you are cutting the funding for the National
I saw the headline.
Unit.
I saw the headline as well.
You're saying that's not happening?
I'm saying that was based on an FOI that would be too convoluted to explain right now, but we recognise the importance of the Violence Reduction Unit.
So you're not cutting their funding?
We're not cutting their funding.
OK.
But the approach that we're taking in our schools is where it starts. So schools are often the safest places for young people, and they are the place where you can engage with a young person. Alex Cole-Hamilton has talked about youth work and so on, really important. But all our young people go through the education system at various different points.
Not everyone engages with education.
That is a fair point. That's a fair point,
so
which is why we work with our schools. We have brilliant programmes of the police going into our schools, educating young people, and then we also fund schemes, mentoring schemes that young people can access. So that is the point around prevention, because once a crime has taken place, it's too late. So it has to be around prevention and accessing young people when you can educate them and shape them so that we don't end up seeing an increase in knife crime.
Jackie Baillie, what do we do about this?
I don't disagree at all with what Kate has outlined, but where I find issue is they're not actually doing it in government where they have the power to do so. So we have fewer youth workers, fewer youth centres. The facilities that are the prevention facilities for children and young people are simply not there anymore because of budget cuts. That is having a direct impact. There's 15% more knife crime in the last 5 years than there ever has been. That is the statistic we don't want. And it literally was about a week ago, a young man, Caden, from East Kilbride, a neighbouring town, lost his life as a result of knife crime. You know, our sympathy is absolutely with his family, but we need to do more than just talk about prevention. We need to actually do it. And the other thing I would add is there is a deterrent value in terms of the police, but we have 800 fewer police since Police Scotland was merged together under the SNP. We've lost local police stations. You know, I know in my local area, they are really struggling to be out on the beat. These were officers that used to work with young people, that used to hand them tickets to go to the local indoor skate park. And when they did that, crime and violence and vandalism dropped by something like 30%. We aren't doing that anymore because of budget cuts with the SNP.
And yet Scotland is a safer place. Crime is at its lowest level
overall crime
just now.
Still
and the vast majority of our young people are good, upright citizens who engage well. So I think the risk with this debate is that it gets out of hand. One crime is one crime too many. but by and large...
3 young people have died over the course of the last 12 months.
Absolutely horrendous, which is why...
taking funding from the project.
Which is why that prevention...
Help.
Which is why we're funding the mentoring schemes, why we're funding youth work, but why we're also focusing very much on education.
All right, let me hear from the audience. We've got parents, we've got youth workers in the audience tonight. Man in the very back row with the beard. Yes.
So I'm a youth worker myself, and what you're talking about, the Green Party, was reducing knife crime during the postcode wars in Maryhill, where they reduced knife crime down, and they worked with young people and the local area to different gangs would come in and you would actually talk to people. The funding got cut for that, and then knife crime went back up. The SNP, everything you're saying is tokenistic. It's just manipulation of the people to try and get them to believe you're doing something. But if it was, then why is knife crime going up, not down?
OK, Kate, I will give you a chance to come back. Lady of the glasses as well, yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. So a lot of our issues in this local area have started post-COVID when the government took all funding away from this area. So, as working for a charity, we know multiple charities in this area who had Scottish Government funding pre-COVID, and then post-COVID it was removed completely, and the Scottish Government funded 3 organisations in the whole of South Lanarkshire post-COVID. So, across this whole community, we've had charities closing down that were doing meaningful grassroots work with families, with young people, connecting with people who are disconnected from school or disconnected from the police or feel threatened and unsafe. So that's why we're having the problems. When are you going to invest more money into this area for us to help ourselves?
There you go, Kate Forbes. That's the prevention that you're talking about right there.
So I think both of you have identified some of the key drivers for the increase. So we know from the data that it's a particular challenge post-COVID. We know about the impact, particularly with young people who were out of school, out of contact with public
We all know that,
bodies
Kate.
and
They just want
authorities.
money. They just want funding.
Well, if it was just as simple as providing more funding, then I don't think we'd be grappling with the issues that we're grappling with. I don't think you can ignore... I mean, if we're going to deal with a social issue like this, we have to understand it. And often, more funding is the easy answer without dealing with the core roots of a challenge. What is happening right now is that post-COVID, we have seen the impact of children being disengaged, more disengaged from school. We have seen the impact of...
so money's not the answer. You think they're wrong, that this is not about funding?
I think it's about investing in the right areas. So it's about investing in a number of the charities that we're invested in right now in around mentoring. But you can't disregard the impact of social media. You can't disregard the impact of inclusion. Exactly. And it needs to be a bigger conversation than just funding.
No parent should go to bed worried that their children are going to be put at risk because they're having a night out on the town. And actually, Kate, I think many of those projects on the ground were doing really good work, particularly on Friday and Saturday nights.
Many are still doing great work.
But you were the finance secretary that cut council budgets. You were the finance secretary that cut council budgets. And many of those community and grassroots organisations, in my area, there's a guy called Callum, used to go out, he was a local community warden. He knew what to do, he knew how to approach them, he knew how to basically tell kids it's not cool to carry a knife. He's no longer doing that at night because the council cuts are fed through from the SNP. But you need a multifaceted approach. Ultimately, we need to make sure councils and voluntary organisations have the resources to deliver within their communities. But also, I think there is also a policing issue here, because if people go out with a knife at night and don't think they're ever going to be stopped and don't think they're ever going to see a policeman, then that's going to be a problem, which is why we're backing calls from the Scottish Police Federation to make sure that we give the police the tools, in other words, the powers and the resources to tackle knife crime. Now, if that means additional stop and search powers, then so be it.
OK, Thomas Kerr.
We cannot allow this to continue.
Yeah, well, look, Kate said that more funding isn't the answer. More funding is the answer. Because a lot of the work that did take place in Scotland over the years, particularly in communities like mine in the East End of Glasgow, were transformational, but those programmes no longer exist. Community centres, for example, have been absolutely gutted. I'm a local councillor in Glasgow City Council. I've seen firsthand what's happened to Glasgow's budget over the years because of SNP cuts, but also policing is an issue as well. And if you speak to any police officer, they will tell you that their funding has been drastically cut as well in the number of police officers that we have. So Kate says that funding isn't the answer. Funding is a huge part of the answer.
It's a huge part of the problem.
But funding, So you're contradicting yourself. SNP austerity is a huge issue.
14 years of
Does
austerity.
Kate Forbes take responsibility for anything?
Oh, I just talked about some of the challenges, particularly after COVID. But you know, we are dealing with the consequences of austerity. Austerity has delivered poorer outcomes for all of us. The cost of living crisis has delivered poorer outcomes. The impact of higher costs.
Austerity under Tories bad, austerity under SNP, it's just nowhere fault. That's Kate's reality, and it's totally wrong. The reality is council budgets have been gutted, and these are the places that make transformational change.
Right, there's other things that we want to talk about here this evening. Your views on everything here. The hashtag is BBCDN on social media. Tonight we're in Hamilton. Next Wednesday we're going to be in Glasgow. The week after that we're going to be in Edinburgh. So if you'd like to come along, as these people have, and be in the audience and ask the questions, just go to the website bbc.co.uk/debate night, and you can click and scan the QR code as well. Let's go to our third question of the night, which comes from Vidya Krishnamurthy. Vidya, good evening.
Hi. My question today is, given increasing NHS waiting times in Scotland, do you believe we need a radical overhaul of how healthcare is delivered, or just more funding, or both?
Thank you. Alex Cole-Hamilton, your health spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats in Scotland. Is this about more money, or is this about radical overhaul?
Well, this is the meat of what I think this election and the Scottish election will be about. It's how we fix our broken NHS, and it's all linked. But actually, part of the solution actually rests outside the immediate health service, and that's in the social care we provide in our communities. Why do I say that? Well, because on any given night in Scotland, 2,000 Scots are stuck in hospital, well enough to go home, but too frail to do so without a care package or a care home bed. And it's getting worse because we aren't paying our care workers enough. We're not attaching them to housing, which they can afford to live in the areas we need care workers to be. And the absence of care in our communities, because we're still not paying anything like what supermarkets are paying, for example, for staff. So it's only for the love of care that people go into it. And the upshot of all of that is that you get an interruption in flow. You get people can't get their hip operation because their operation is cancelled because there's no bed for them in the hospital. You can't get people out of A&E, not because there's a problem in an A&E, but because you can't get people into the wider hospital. And that leaves people, ambulances stacking up outside A&E. So you've got pensioners lying in the cold with a hip fracture for 8 hours waiting for an ambulance.
OK, that's the problem. It's solutions that we're looking for.
The solution is in social care, in large part in social care. It's investment in the NHS, it's streamlining of the NHS, but my goodness, it's about making care a profession of choice, making it something that people want to aspire to do, making it a competitive salary that will see people leave the jobs that they are in to go into care, because without it, things are only going to get worse.
OK. Jackie Baillie, south of the border, West Streeting says this is not about money, it's about radical reform and radical overhaul. Same here?
We do need reform of the NHS in Scotland. We have 14 territorial health boards, 8 special boards. We've got bureaucracy coming out of our ears. The rate of increase of managers is more than the rate of increase of clinicians, doctors, nurses. Can you allow me to finish instead of interrupting? But let me say to you, the staff we have in the NHS are wonderful. The doctors, the nurses, people, you know, the paramedics that take care of us. But they are not resourced adequately to do it. There is a lot of wait a minute.
You're saying more money?
No, what I'm saying is there's a lot of waste in the system. Let me give you an example. So today we discover yesterday that waiting lists have gone up yet again, despite John Swinney pledging that they would reduce, you know, making fanfare announcements about it. They've gone up again. So there are 850,000 odd people in Scotland on a waiting list. That's you. That's somebody in your family, that's a friend. We all know somebody caught in that situation. We have the absurdity, if you are in one NHS board, take Greater Glasgow and Clyde, OK? Because that's my local board. You want to send somebody, or I've argued for somebody, who's been 2 years on a waiting list to go to the Golden Jubilee, another NHS hospital, and they won't do it, because they won't spend the money sending them to the Golden Jubilee.
So you'd spend the money?
We have one NHS in Scotland. You should not, because of your health board area, be subject to a postcode lottery when there is capacity elsewhere.
OK.
Right? We need to put patients first.
Lorna Slater.
That's the important thing.
The situation that we've got in Scotland is one of both funding and a lack of historic investment. So our doctors and nurses are working with outdated systems. There's information being passed around on paper that should be digitised. IT systems and computers are way out of date. Now, that's a legacy of 14 years of Conservative government who did not upgrade the NHS. Now, a Labour government have come in, and yes, they have put some more money into it, but not enough to really overcome that more than a decade of lack of investment.
The NHS has devolved to Scotland.
Yeah. But the money, but Scotland, all roads lead to Westminster because Scotland's pocket money comes from Westminster. Now, I'm really proud that the Scottish Greens have pushed the Scottish Government to adjust income taxes, which has raised £1 billion a year for public services, but that is not enough to make the difference. The money for the NHS comes from Westminster, and we have not had enough of that over the last 14, 15 years to keep the NHS at the level that's needed. Now, great that Labour is giving us a little bit more, good, but it needs that significant commitment from the Labour government to invest in those systems so that our poor doctors and nurses have good equipment to work with and the best IT systems in the world.
But Lorna, without a proper plan and proper reforms, we will not get the results out of the NHS that we want. The Institute for Fiscal Studies said you could pump more money into the Scottish NHS. Without reform, you will not get any better productivity.
Forbes, that's the problem. You've got 1 in 9 Scots, according to these new figures, are now on a waiting list. Record spending on the NHS in Scotland, but poorer outcomes than ever before. Why is that happening?
So it is record funding on the NHS and social care, and we're starting to turn a corner in terms of increased appointments in particular, where we had targets for March this year of 64,000 and we've reached 105,000. But ultimately our NHS is the people, it's the worker force, it's our nurses and it's our doctors. And if we want to reduce delayed discharge, so delayed discharge also known by bed blocking, which we know is a big risk and a reason why waiting lists are so long, then we need to ensure that our social care service is properly staffed. Did you know that over a quarter of our workforce in the social care sector are from abroad? And under Labour, with the immigration white paper, they will not be able to come here. Under Reform's proposal, they will not be able to come here. We are a small population of 5 million people. We need, as the gentleman said earlier, we need the doctors and the nurses that have been good enough to serve here, to serve in our NHS, and we should be supporting them.
Precisely, but...
And on top of that, we also need to protect the NHS in its current form. So earlier I talked about cutting through the rhetoric to the reality. You also have Nigel Farage who thinks you should charge for the NHS.
Let's just clear that up.
Ultimately, we need to make sure that we protect
So Nigel Farage has said, let's re-examine the whole funding model. He said that to the BBC back in March. What does that mean?
It means radical reform of the NHS, because right now in its current form it's not working. It means it will always be free at the point of need. This idea we're going to privatise it is nonsense.
So who's going to pay for it if we re-examine the funding model?
The reality is that currently the NHS in its own circumstances is not working. We're tossing money at it constantly, but it's getting sucked up into a black hole. It needs radical reform to make sure that it works. There's enough waste in the NHS that we can cut out and put into frontline services to make sure it works. The other thing we can do to try and keep doctors here is by cutting taxes, because right now the SNP is made as the highest tax part. We are training up doctors in this country who are then leaving to go elsewhere because they can make more money other places rather than here in Scotland. So we should make it competitive so we can keep our own workforce here. It's very clear how we fix the NHS. We make sure that you reform it properly, you fix the issues that exist in it, you cut out the middle management, because what's happening now is we're tossing funding at it, yet people are still using their life savings to go private to get their hip replaced rather than try to use the NHS because they can't get it. It doesn't work in its current form and it has to be reformed.
Is he right? Is he right?
I accept that the NHS needs radical reform. I think when Kate was talking about social care in Scotland, I accept it's in crisis, Kate. But what did your government do? You didn't listen to anybody else. You didn't listen to stakeholders.
We've increased
and you ploughed
salaries,
you ploughed ahead with the National Care Service spending £31 million setting it up, which you then scrapped. That was £31 million that could have gone into the communities to hire more care workers and more nurses within social care. I accept social care needs reform. It also needs a competent government. And what was Nicola Sturgeon's assessment assessment of Hamza Yousaf's NHS recovery plan. We found out only last week. She said it was awful. This is a question of competence in government, and your government has failed our NHS.
You did drop the plan for the National Care Service.
Yeah, because nobody in Parliament was going to vote for it, despite having said at the beginning that they were going to support it. The approach to social care is absolutely critical. And if you listen to Scottish Care, who are an independent representative organisation, they will tell you that they are facing a crisis of not being able to recruit enough workforce. Unemployment in Scotland is at rock bottom. It's just over 3%. So it's not that there are people that are unemployed that you can recruit. We now have limitations on visas because apparently under both Labour and the Conservatives, they deem social care workers as not skilled enough under the immigration white paper. And yet we know that, you know, for our loved ones, they are absolutely the skills that we need to protect and defend. So when it comes to our nurses, when it comes to our doctors, if you want no other answer for the future of the NHS, it is this. We need the doctors, we need the nurses. We have funded an increase in the workforce, but we ultimately, for a population of 5 million people, need to make sure that we can attract those into our country.
Let me say, nobody values social care workers more than I do, OK? Kate Forbes was the first finance minister I dealt with when we made demands for £15 an hour.
And we increased the wages.
Hang on, Kate.
Because we valued social care workers. She said no. 4 subsequent SNP budgets later, and finance minister after finance minister said no. We have the workforce in this country because this isn't, you know, something that is just made last month. This problem has been years in the making. You will find social care workers in retail, in hospitality, you know, at the checkout at Asda or Lidl or name whatever supermarket you want, right? Because they get paid more there, because they are valued more there. We should be valuing them to do the really important job they do in social care, and that means increasing the amount they get. And this is something people don't know. Currently, I think you've just raised it to £12.60 an hour. But if you have somebody coming in from abroad, you're required to pay them £12.82 an hour. Actually, I just think they all deserve £15 an hour. But why have that difference? This is down to the Scottish Government. The SNP could have done something about it if they wanted to. So, you know, no kind of, you know, crocodile tears now. Actually value the social care workforce and put your money where your mouth is.
We have in the audience tonight doctors, nurses and, most importantly, people on waiting lists, I think, as well. Lady with the glasses.
I think a lot of Scotland's health problems are preventable, and if we actually need a joined-up approach where social care, education and everything is working together so that it doesn't end up that people are going to health for a crisis point. But as Jackie said as well, it's a postcode lottery, and at the moment the SNP are looking to downgrade Wishaw's neonatal unit and take that away, an award-winning unit which supports so many young babies and families, and then they're going to have to go to Edinburgh or Glasgow when that disappears, which is just not going to support their health needs at all and make things much, much worse.
Thank you, thank you. A man in the check shirt on the back row. Yeah.
I do agree with the point that Kate has made about, you know, incentivizing people into social care and into medical profession. And a case in point is, you know, the new immigration white paper that the Labour government has just launched. It actually discourages people from coming here and working in the medical and the social care sector. I know of hundreds and thousands of students from India, China and elsewhere who have gone back after studying here for 4 years because they just didn't have the visa to continue. And that's all the money gone down the drain where we could have had, you know, 50% more doctors in this country.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Man here, yes.
I mentioned earlier that I own a social care business. There's a lot of truth floating around here, but as usual, it's a mixture between the parties, in my view. The mantra for me is if you don't fix social care, you don't fix the NHS, because people are stuck in hospital, they cannot get package of care. We've got 65 staff, half of them are foreign workers, so the foreign visa scheme has to continue because we need these workers. They're doing a fantastic job. They're doing a job that a lot of people locally, for whatever reason, are not willing to do. So that's all true. The Scottish Government have elevated care jobs in the sense that they have to have mandatory qualifications, but sadly there's very little support for that in terms of finance. And as usual, it's sad to say it, but everyone's got great vision statements, but where is the money coming from? Where is this going to be funded from? Because sadly we see it going down. South Lanarkshire Council currently have about a £20 million deficit in their social care budget, last time I checked, and that is not untypical across Scotland.
OK, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
You're so right to ask where the money's coming from, but let's put it this way. To keep one of those 2,000 Scots in hospital every night costs £400 a night. I mean, you couldn't find a hotel that would take £400 a night from you, right? But for the cost of a nighttime checkup from a social care worker in the community, it's more like 80. I mean, the differential here, I mean, that policy would pay for itself, that initial investment, that outlay, but also providing key worker housing, making sure that, particularly in remote and rural populations, there are homes for those care workers to live in at affordable rate that is reserved for them and them alone. And without it, this crisis is just going to spiral out.
OK. Lady with the glasses, over here, yes.
You've all mentioned the requirement in the NHS for a massive overhaul to improve it, but I haven't really heard a lot of details on exactly what that means. Nobody's mentioned like the use of technology. My understanding of what the NHS at the moment is it's archaic. Yeah. There is so much technology out there, including AI, that could actually help alleviate some of the pressure that's on them and take on some of the work. And then a lot of that staffing issues could be solved potentially by that, because you could redistribute people to where they need to be and solve a lot of the funding issues as well. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Kate Forbes, never mind the AI, we still have an app in Scotland for the National Health Service.
I think with data and technology, we just need to make sure that we take people with us. So you're absolutely right that we have seen, for example, massive improvements in diagnostics when it comes to reducing waiting times, because we are depending more on technology that sometimes is smarter than people, and it is able to cut waiting times. So that's where we've seen the biggest progress. So we've seen huge progress in dermatology, for example, using scanning. So that is in there right now. I think the difficulty is ensuring that we do take people with us when it comes to data and technology, because there can be an element of concern around that, and it will never replace the need for people and for caring, kind, professional
We can all use
people.
apps, Kate, though, can't we?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, there are some examples at the moment of apps. The point is that the NHS is much loved. We need to make sure, in terms of the detail of what we're doing, it's around increasing appointments, it's ensuring that there are more appointments, particularly with your GP, it's investing in that technology, and it's cutting waiting lists, using technology and targeted funding in order to make progress, which is why I say we're starting to turn a corner.
Jackie Baillie?
The question's absolutely on point, because there are consultants using pages because they don't have Wi-Fi in the hospital. There are medical secretaries using fax machines because they don't have the ability to use laptops and other things. Do you know, we need to modernise the NHS. But coming back to the app, this is really interesting, because the government down south has an app for the whole of England, OK? It's actually provided by a company headquartered in Glasgow. They have been trying to beat down the door of St Andrew's House to speak to the Scottish Government about providing an app Scotland-wide. That's simply not happened. We have 14 health boards doing things 14 different ways, and we're not harnessing the benefit of technology. One word on the GP appointments, because it looks like a great announcement. 100,000 GP appointments. And you are talking about... Excuse me. You are talking about one GP appointment of 15 minutes every 2 weeks. That's the extra. That's not going to solve the crisis in the NHS.
Jackie, we're out of time this evening. A full list of candidates taking part in the by-election here in Hamilton is on your screen right now. That's it for this evening, though. We're back with you next week in Glasgow. Have a look at our website if you want to come along and join us there. If you missed any of tonight's programme, we're repeated at 10:40, straight after the news on BBC One Scotland, or you can watch it any time that suits you on the BBC iPlayer. Thank you very much indeed to my panel here tonight, and to our brilliant audience here in Hamilton, and to you at home for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.